So my name is Jean-Claude Brizard. I'm a senior advisor at the College Board. Prior to the College Board, I was the chief executive for Chicago Schools and Rochester, New York Schools. I've got three distinguished panelists, and I'll start with Dr. Lillian Lowery, who is currently the Maryland State Superintendent of Schools, a position she's held since 2012. Prior to coming to Maryland, Lillian was head of schools for the state of Delaware, and her biggest challenge now is implementing the Common Core state standards across the entire state of Maryland. She's a fellow of the fourth class of the Pahara Aspen Education Fellowship Program, of course, part of the AGLN. Second, I have Cami Anderson, who is currently the superintendent of schools in Newark, New Jersey, the largest school district in New Jersey. Cami and I worked in New York City together, where she was head of the District 79 schools, a program that was designed for out-of-school kids and incarcerated youth. Pretty tough challenge in New York City. Cami also served as the executive director for Teach for America in New York, where she was my wife's executive director, actually. She is a fellow of the second class of the Pahara Aspen Education Fellowship and a member of the AGLN. John Deasy is superintendent of schools in Los Angeles, as you heard from Linda Resnick earlier today, the second largest school district in the United States. Prior to coming to LA, John was the Deputy Director of Education for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and served as Superintendent of Schools in Prince George's County, Maryland, Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, and the Coventry Public Schools in Rhode Island. He is a fellow of the inaugural class of the Pahara Aspen Education Fellowship and a member of the AGLN, as well as a moderator for the Aspen Institute. So let me set the stage by quoting former Secretary Richard Riley, who said that we are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that haven't been invented, in order to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. One only has to look at Google Glass and the fact that an iPhone app can translate 95% of the world's languages to know that the world is not just changing rapidly, it is changing exponentially. So the fact is we have no idea what's going to happen in education in the next 25 years. But nonetheless, we're going to make some predictions today. So we're going to start from the philosophical, get to specifics on curriculum assessment, pedagogy, and get back to structure of our school system. So I'm going to start with a quote from a speech I was giving at MIT about a year ago to all three panelists, given by David Putnam, and he said the following: "It's tragic because by my reading, should we fail to radically change our approach to education, the same cohort we are attempting to protect could find that their entire future is scuttled by our timidity." So my question to you, I know you guys are not shy at all and you're not timid, where should we focus such radical change? If it's an area we're focusing, is it working? And if it's not, why? Should we begin to think about uncharted territory here? Lillian?
So I believe we really need to start with early learning and childhood development, because NEKC did a report, the foundation, about 2 years ago that affirmed what we all already know, is that if a student leaves third grade, not reading on grade level, that is your dropout child right there. We can look at those students and know they're going to drop out. We're going to talk later about the rigor that we need to include in our curriculum, but we have in the state of Maryland, and many states have, gone to quality rating systems for our child care providers, and we've also moved to kindergarten readiness, because I submit to you that the achievement gap is not created in the school system. Much of the achievement gap walks in, and those are usually our students of poverty who have not had the cultural or kind of civic exposure that many of our students have had. We need to really take a good look at what is happening with them 0 to 5. With the kindergarten readiness assessments, we can at least start early by finding out exactly where they are performing and start interventions early, instead of letting students walk into a classroom and get further and further behind. So we have something in Maryland called the Judy Centers. It is named after Judy Hoyer, who is the late wife of Congressman Steny Hoyer. And these centers are attached to Title I schools. They are either in the schools or they are in some community center near their school, and it is full service for students from child care to Head Start or early child care provisions to kindergarten, all the way through either the 5th or 8th grade. We have data that demonstrate that this is making a huge difference in these students' academic preparedness once they leave 3rd grade and go through high school.
So we're going to focus on early learning, and that's critical for the changes that we need to see in elementary, middle, and high schools in our country.
Because getting a student college and career ready when they reach 9th grade is just too late. If that student is already lagging behind there, then the best we can do is probably what we've been doing for far too long, is getting them out of high school. We're really good at getting students out of high school. We've got to now focus and concentrate on what do they do when they leave high school. Are they ready for college? Are they ready for career? So the literacy skills early on in childhood development will make a critical difference in their path to college and career readiness.
Cami?
Thanks, and thank you to the prior panel. That was very insightful. So I first have to say it's always a pleasure serving on panels with John, who's the only person that takes business casual to a more extreme, version than I do. It really makes me feel awesome. Thank you, John, for your inspiration. Let me actually just make a case for the word bold not even being bold enough. In a place like Newark, New Jersey, when I arrived 2 years ago, less than a third of our 3rd graders were reading and writing at grade level, according to an assessment that most folks in the country find laughably low in terms of its rigor. So that's probably about half if we truly talked about what grade level looks like, a la the Common Core. And we run around and talk about how great our grad rates are at 70%, but New Jersey lacks any kind of rigorous exit assessment. So when you really dig into that, it's about 38%, and of that 38%, 3/4 of those young people came in on grade level and passed a assessment that is, in essence, a standard of 9th grade readiness. So we took them at 9th grade, and we proudly kept them at 9th grade. So and we have much better measures now that we can look at growth and all sorts of things. By any measure, we lose 1 in 4 students from the 9th grade to the 10th grade. We lose another one between 10th and 12th. So take your pick, the sort of need for vision and boldness and to sort of confront the notion that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different result. Well, I think we can all agree the result's pretty abysmal. And the life outcomes for young people who leave a system like Newark or anywhere for that matter, lacking the social, emotional, academic skills to excel in college and higher education, which is a gateway to careers, however you slice it, is virtually non-existent. So when we send a young person out our doors with a diploma that either means nothing or without a diploma, we are creating an economic crisis. You are 3 times more likely to be unemployed if you don't have a college diploma. You are twice as likely to be incarcerated. I mean, I could go on and on. So I guess the basic point I'm making is the need for bold thinking could not be more profound. And I will just share one potentially dissonant, if not different, perspective. Of course, early learning is critical, and of course, young people who live in concentrations of high poverty need additional support and early warning systems, and we know so much about what little people need to get ahead and be on the right pathway, and so we should embrace all of that. But I also served, as you know, the other end of the spectrum. We ran a system of thousands and thousands of students who were off the beaten path because the system had failed them. And on Rikers Island, the largest maximum security jail in this country, we served about 500 young people who were between the ages of 15 and 17. And on Rikers, we only taught towards the GED diploma, which for those of you who are not from the US, is an alternate diploma that was invented in World War II for folks coming back from the war to accelerate them getting a diploma so they could get into the workforce. It hasn't been rewritten since then. And the kids call it the good enough diploma. The adults, we keep giving it, even though the results on GED graduates in some ways is worse than dropouts. And as a result, we were teaching to the GED because we felt great, and we could give the young person on Rikers a GED, regardless of whether or not that young person was coming in with awesome academic skills or horrible academic skills. Long story short, we recruited an entire new team, gutted the entire talent system, and that's where I think the boldness has to come in around who leads our schools and who teaches our children and who provides the social worker, the social work support, the peer coaching, and all the wraparound support. So we gutted it. We changed it 100%. Fast forward last year, I'm now not there anymore. The school on Rikers Island gave 40 Regents diplomas, and for those of you who are not familiar with New York City, that is a big and rigorous piece. And I say that to say, by the way, we didn't even give them there. They're like, whoa, we can't give the Regents on Rikers. We can give the GED. It's a federal test. We can't get Regents tests out there. And I would submit we did that just by doing 3 things. Number 1, completely changing our expectations of our young people and not assuming that if you can't read by the 3rd grade, we should start building prison cells for you. 2, by having the boldness to do a very unpopular thing, which was zero-based staff the entire thing. We literally laid everyone off through a very small clause in our contract. I personally handpicked and recruited the principal out of the best in New York City, and he is extraordinary. And we were able to offer him an incentive through another tough negotiated piece by the Chancellor, Joel Klein, and then empowered him to recruit a team of individuals who shared that mindset and who had the skill. So on some level, it is working, the sort of talent approach, which business, got long ago. But on another level, not fast enough, because we have too many young people who didn't get those Regents diplomas and who are falling behind, and we are fundamentally robbing them of the American dream.
If I just may, Cami makes my point, actually. If we do what we need to do 0 to 5, if we have some kind of social emotional development opportunity for these students, you probably wouldn't have seen a lot of them in Rikers. Some of them you would have, the social and emotional. What we're hoping that will happen is that we will invest those dollars that we have, federal, state, otherwise, at the beginning in 0 to 5, so that we don't have to invest them in a prison system, so that the students will be kind of chartered for success without that intervention.
So before you go, John, so Cami, I worked at Rikers Island. It was my first year teaching, and that number is fascinating. After the first year of doing the zero-based staffing, what happens after that with Last In, First Out in New York City?
That's a good question. What happens after there from a tactical standpoint is leadership, and good leadership knows how to sort of keep good people and, frankly, game a broken system. What happens as you lose monies and you lose students and resources, the policies in New York are no different than lots of places, including Newark, which means that you have to right size or downsize exclusively based on seniority, not at all based on fit or quality. Plus, by the way, if you're an awesome teacher, you still could tank on Rikers. So you need to be awesome, and you also need to be a good fit for the mission, the culture, and the values of the organization that you're in. And the public policies that we have, mostly promoted by contracts but also state statute, are Byzantine. They are truly Byzantine.
John?
So thanks. Oh, and Cami, thank you. This, for the record, is my new Aspen business casual shirt. Brand new for this event. I just want to be very clear about that.
Awesome.
So, second for context. So, Los Angeles has a preschool program which we run, K through 12 program which we run, a young adult ed program which we run. That's 909,000 students who come every day. About 88% live in circumstances of poverty, most unimaginable poverty. 17,000 youth are homeless, roofless. They don't actually have a shelter. No one looks like me in LA. 77% of the students speak another language other than English as their first language. We translate everything into 8 languages every single day for LAUSD, and every single solitary one of those students wants to be you and us. They want to graduate. They want meaningful employment. They want to enter post-secondary without remediation. They want health care, a roof over their head. Currently, a third is our best estimate. We think it's low. Are undocumented, live in entire shadow society, and every conceivable thing we would imagine you could do with a Social Security number is not available to those folks. So what I say with all sincerity is LA is America, only sooner. And we are coming to a hometown near you, and we had better figure this out. How well we did this. how, so how well we do this and how well we stumble and figure that out and move quicker is going to matter enormously around this. I'm going to take my cue from our Aspen sister Dima. It was like, guts. Like, really? Just push as hard as you can, as quickly as you can, for youth rights. The system is fundamentally designed, and appropriately so in part, for the adults to be able to do their job and lift youth out of poverty. But the system itself is mostly, if not completely, silent on the rights of students. So if we're thinking about the transformations, they are not just and necessary, how we do about early literacy, how we do about youth off track, how are we going to deal with the academy, which is producing teachers and methodologies for which the students have already exceeded the technology ability for how we're training our first new teachers around this, in content that is already stale by the time they walk into the school. We are talking about the ability and the necessity to transform a system pre-K through 14, 16, if we are going to maintain anything of the American dream for the totality of the other and remain competitive and cooperatively competitive on a national stage. So we've thought about the transformations in the way that one would think about students' rights being in a box, and you need 4 sides to those boxes so that those rights leak away. So it's been about negotiations. So like all of us, we live in Uniontown, card carrying union member my whole life. I have 11 unions I get the opportunity to negotiate with every day in LA. And you think about how do you secure the opportunity to transform the system through negotiations. The second is regulation. How do our governing bodies work with an elected school board? How do you pass those policies so that when students who have bonded with, quote, our best and brightest teachers are not ripped away from them in schools disproportionate. So schools that serve our most neediest and most impacted youth tend to have our youngest staff. So when you do a layoff, 70% of that whole faculty has to disappear overnight. It's a fundamental violation of youth's right to stability around that. So policies in terms of regulation, legislation, actively involved at the state level and at the federal level for laws that honor, support, protect adults' rights, and do exactly the same for youth rights around that. And lastly, litigation. Now, in this country, when all else fails for the other, you go to the court and you pray for redress. And we have used it sparingly and profoundly effectively. And the thought of making sure that there are cases for those who are not able to vote, can't lobby, can't actually put money into large PACs, but are fundamentally hoping that this works for them so that one day they could do that, their voice actually needs to be protected around that. So that's how we've been thinking about this. I would say that I am exceedingly worried about the cautiousness of this and this pace issue. And I actually think you were spot on in terms of the notion that it is about courage. And it's why you get the privilege of receiving an unbelievable gift of your fellow brothers and sisters at an institute like this. And you have to go home and actually be out there in high risk for those who have everything to lose for that risk. So that's kind of thing of this, but it's really K-16, I think, JC.
So leaders like these make me hopeful about our country. So let's get a bit specific on curriculum and assessment. So we know within the policy framework, there's real work going on in our classrooms and across our schools. So the chairman of Google recently said that every 2 days, we create as much content as we did from the dawn of civilization to 2003. So what are the implications, Lillian, for what we teach, how we teach, and what we assess?
Okay. One of the things that we've got to address is the learning objectives that we engage with students and teachers. So let's think about Bloom's taxonomy. Where we mostly live in our schools are at those lower levels. So the knowledge we teach them, they comprehend it, and then they apply it. Pretty much when we look at state standards across the country, that's pretty much where we stay. They can apply the knowledge, we're happy. If the knowledge is going to be portable, we have got to make sure that they can move to those higher order thinking skills of analysis of information, synthesizing information, and evaluating information so that students can create new knowledge. So if we move there, we are going to have a huge paradigm shift for our teachers and students. So what we've done is move there, in theory. We have developed something called Common Core State Standards, and those standards are the result of conversations among the nation's governors and their chief state school officers, people who run state agencies for education. For the first time that I can remember, and I've been a traditional educator for a long time, pre-K through higher ed finally got together and decided what essential knowledge should be at each grade level along the continuum of a student's learning experience. So what should students know and be able to do by the end of 3rd grade, by the end of 6th grade, by the end of 12th grade, so that they truly are college and career ready?
So, Lillian, I don't think we can estimate enough the notion that in our country's history, your point is we've never been able to say that algebra in Mississippi and Maine and Minnesota is the same.
Absolutely.
And that is a cusp of something we've never experienced before.
And not only, excuse my voice, but not only have we not been able to say that, each state was saying it at a different place and a different time. There was no coherence. So what I would think was a great education in Maryland could be completely different in New Jersey, could be completely different in California. So not only are we deciding together what essential knowledge is and what it looks like, period, we are putting some cohesion around it. For example, math now, through the clusters, through Common Core State Standards, will be taught in clusters instead of these discrete pieces of knowledge that doesn't make sense to students and they don't know how to use it. And the math is not only focused on what do I know, if I get the right answer or not, but students will now have to demonstrate the logic behind the answer. It's performance-based and inquiry-based learning. They have to be able to explain conceptually why they got the answer. As a matter of fact, one of the consortia assessments, or both of them, but I'm with the Partnership for Assessment for College and Career Readiness, students get credit on the assessment for not just getting the right answer, they also get partial credit for actually delineating how they came to the right answer. So we start pushing these higher order thinking skills. Instead of reading a passage in English language arts and summarizing the passage, students now will be given several passages, read the passages, and determine if there is cause and effect. So we're really asking them to push their thinking, to really analyze the knowledge that they are getting, to synthesize it, and then evaluate it in a way that makes sense. This way, when we focus on these higher order thinking skills, this becomes portable knowledge. In other words, it won't be knowledge, discrete knowledge learned for a moment in time so that I can pass Algebra 1, but this is a staircase to a trajectory of learning and essential knowledge that I can take from one place to the other, and is portable across. Some people ask, well, why did we just stop with English language arts and math? Because we believe these are the literacy skills that are portable. We have started implementing, I'll tell you my story and why I'm so glad to be here with you. Peter has already heard this as I was here last week. Maryland started implementing the Common Core State Standards early because we started unpacking them in 2010. So we were within this dilemma of what do? We started unpacking these standards. We know that our students need this to be college and career ready. Do we hurry up and wait for 2 years, or do we start implementing the standards? We started implementing the standards. And a funny thing happened along the way. As we were implementing the more rigorous standards, rigorous, cohesive standards that make sense, that some of the best minds in the country, because these standards are based on the highest, most rigorous standards in our country, but also those of the highest performing countries. So we know this is the right thing to do. We start implementing the standards. It gets to the year, and we have to assess, because that's what we do here. So we have to have a data point at the end of every year to ensure student progress. We gave the tests that we had been given. So we implemented the Common Core State Standards that are new with a test that wasn't aligned. And so what we now have to guard against, and Cami and John can talk to you about this in more detail, some people look for any excuse to derail the path forward. And so what we've got to manage is Common Core state standards is the right thing. We're not going to move for that, but manage the communication around what just happened here in a state that has been deemed a pretty high-performing state. So we believe that if college and career readiness really does mean that when students graduate from high school, they have choices, they can go to a two-year college. Hopefully, many of them will have the early college opportunity that Mrs. Resnick talked about, because we have those opportunities in early college too, where they can graduate from high school with an associate's degree, that they have choices of going into work and or to the university. And let me just say one more thing. We talk a lot in education about students going into higher ed and having to go through remedial courses. When I talk to people in the business world, they have the same concerns about skills, about that skills match and the remediation they have to do for even employees coming in on the beginning entry level. So we have a great opportunity here as a nation to agree on what the work is and push it forward collectively.
Yeah, so Lillian, this notion that are we going to derail this, is that we should really give a little bit of time to this issue. So every conceivable, we're doing the exact same standards 3,000 miles away. Same type of assessments. We're at a point where we're asking teachers and schools in the United States of America to fundamentally change the entire curriculum, tremendously change the entire way you teach, and change the entire assessment system at the exact same moment in time. That has not happened in kind of the America development of our public education system at one point. It's in a triple point of tremendous opportunity, but tremendous consternation. So we're having this deep debate about, is this federal overreach? We're having this deep debate about whether we should even using these assessments. And it is a point that when I think about all of these debates, which are very intense, and we need to thoughtfully think them through, what's missing from those are students who are fundamentally now graduating, who do not possess the skills to be even remotely competitive in large numbers. And so I think the dilemma we face is, how long are we going to debate this while we watch students kind of slip away from us? I think the second thing, Lillian, that you raised, which was really important, is that this is also an opportunity to really think differently about instruction. So we're in the middle of a gigantic, even by our own scale, way once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We've chosen to give a tablet to every single student and every teacher and have all content in digital form, which we're rolling out in LA. So the scale, of course, is gigantic, but doing both of those at the same time, when we think about the implications for that, they're actually stunning. So you have, we test piloted these during the bidding process, and you had kindergartners coming in to the thing and immediately just opening up. I mean, like, we didn't have to tell them what to do. It is almost innate in terms of access. And we live in cities with profound digital divides. We want to kind of end that piece around that. The implications for student work are very, very fascinating. So we have at the moment piloted all digital schools where there's no paper. And one of the things that we're learning is it's becoming less and less obvious what your assignment is and your assignment, because you are both collaborative working. So actually, whose property right is the final product in terms of grading? And this whole world is kind of opening up for students. And then you have students who are accessing courses online, walking in, JC's the principal, I'd like my credits now, these are from Stanford. Well, they're not taking them from us. We have a system that says, no, you have to go to room 217 to take that course. And like, I don't think so. I just took this with one of the most profound professors. And so this notion is shifting very quickly side by side with these.
So it's a question I actually had for you, John, and then perhaps we should go into that. Michael Bobber says that we have an avalanche coming. He's, of course, referring to higher education and MOOCs and everything else. So what's the impact? How, in terms of credentialing, traditional credits, traditional schooling, what's going to happen to K-12 as universities completely change? We have maybe about 48 seconds.
So quick, I'll go quickly on this one, which is that the one good piece of news is that prior standards were developed by having a bunch of third grade teachers get in a room and say, what should third graders know? And, you know, higher ed getting in a room and saying, you know, what should you talk about in English 1, you know, freshman year? And mathematicians duking it out about what, not a math person, I don't know why I chose that, but I was like, wow, in over my head on that one. But because of they were super disjointed. So I guess one hopeful piece is these are by order of magnitude, these standards are 10 times better and provide an incredible roadmap because they were based on those key skills that actually turn out to matter greatly in terms of college persistence and college acceleration and also career. Interestingly enough, as the alt ed person, career and technical ed in the US has primarily been a euphemism for teaching African American boys how to fix cars that went out of rotation in 1952. It has not been, a visionary, entrepreneurial endeavor to connect business, right? So my point is, when they did the research on it, they actually looked at all the skills that are necessary for careers, and it turned out the reading, writing, thinking, and logic skills for the first year of your career are as high, if not higher, than college. So I say that to say it's hopeful because it's a blueprint and it's a good one. And for the first time, we have standards that make sense, that represent rigor, that are research-based, that are a pathway to the future, and it is going to force the entire industry, technology, curriculum, assessments. And we all had a press conference a year ago where a bunch of superintendents stood up and said, we're not buying any of your stuff. You all are taking all your old crap and dressing it up, and putting a, Common Core.
Crap.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, he said something else afterwards. But people are just dressing up their old stuff and trying to put a stamp on it. It's not going to work. It is going to force a level of innovation and quality products, the likes of which we've never seen in this country. And I, for one, am really excited about that. So we're just on the cutting edge of that, and I think it's really, really hopeful.
So we have to stop. So quickly,
two predictions. One is that the high school is going to lose the monopoly on the diploma.
Bravo.
Very, very quickly. And second of all is that content will be constant. Right now, content is finite the moment the textbook comes out. It will be constant.
Thank you.
So
we have a couple more minutes. Go ahead.
Thank
you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Before I make my prediction, I would just like to make an appeal. Cami talked early on in her comments about being bold. I will tell you that's what these Common Core state standards are, and we're getting pushback. There are people out here in the Maine who are trying to derail them. Several states that actually adopted the Common Core state standards have been compelled by state legislators and others to pull out. And I will tell you, teachers absolutely like them because they get to go far more deeply and touch the material in ways that they can really go back in and check with kids for understanding, rather than these multiple standards that we have that realistically no one believed that anybody could teach with fidelity anywhere. But the fear is I've at least got to expose students if they're going to be assessed on it. So nothing was done well. This allows us to, in a really cohesive way, think about the trajectory of learning to college and career, but also give teachers the time to be more creative, more visionary, and dig more deeply into the subject area. So we need voices in the arena of boldness, and we hope all of you will be great ambassadors, that these are some really, really good standards, and we need to make sure that our students are exposed to them.
So I want to touch on three things you guys have said around college and career and skills. We've heard expressions about skills gap from last panel to Linda Resnick talking about this, and career tech education. And we use the expression college and career ready as if we know what that really means. Talk to me about education to careers. Right now, the College Board, we're focusing on perhaps looking at success in the first job beyond college. What does that look like? And we've seen everyone talk about the shift from literacy and math being top to non-cognitive, what's that we refer to soft skills, and I hate that expression, to how you can survive in a job and adapt and create new knowledge from what you know. So talk to me about how the world of curriculum is going to change to prepare kids for work beyond college.
So take one of the skills, they're not soft skills, so it's non-cognitive. Take one of these skills which is threaded throughout the entire Common Core. You can call it a number of different things. Grit, persistence, whatever that item is that we want to name. This is the ability for students to persist in complex, ill-defined problems for a long period of time till you can be able to develop an answer. That's exactly what employers want to take place, and what they need that. They actually do not want you to be able to tell you the thematic themes in Romeo and Juliet. No matter how well you can write that and how well you can spell that, the notion, of course, is that's why we've shifted a majority of the text to nonfiction text so that you can acquire a sufficient level of knowledge and write to a complex, ill-defined problem and persist through that, which means you need to give teachers and students time to deeply wrestle individually and collectively around this. So we were all talking about the shift that we're watching almost immediately is a shift from an obsession on testing and test results to an obsession on practice in the classroom with students. And I actually think that's a pretty healthy thing.
So when I was in New York, I ran part of my portfolio was adult education and career and technical education, not the CTE high schools, but the sort of traditional CTE sequences. And in the US, career and technical ed, CTE, and kids have names for that too. All you have to do is ask young people. They'll tell you what's up. But we had something like 47 different sequences that range from construction to technology for business, hospitality, training for healthcare careers, et cetera. And they typically had sprung up over the years from, someone had a passion or some partnership or a curriculum or whatnot. And so we took a step back and we actually evaluated all 47 of them on a number of criterion that included, A, is this a career that has longevity? It's a growing field. B, you, in addition to whatever, career skill, it's also accompanied by reading, writing, thinking, and speaking at high levels, which we know is going to be true of 70% of the jobs in the US in the next 5 years, even by anyone's standards, meaning everyone loves to bring out the plumber example, and plumbers do make good money, but those types of jobs, and by the way, that's becoming digitized and complicated and all, gone are the days when you can obtain a job or a career where you don't need high levels of ability to communicate, read, write, think, speak, and do basic numeric functions at very high levels. So we evaluated on that. Were they getting that? Was the industry growing? Was it upwardly mobile? In other words, opportunities for advancement. So we sort of created this set of criteria. We evaluated our 47 sequences, and literally we probably ended up with like 4 or 5 that we wanted to keep. And then, we sort of dared to start thinking, oh my gosh, like what are the next 20, right? So green jobs. I mean, interestingly enough, right, everyone talks about green jobs are like the new frontier, but you go into career and technical education in K-12 and you what's the pathway? It is a new and emerging industry, so part of it is that no one knows, right? But also nobody's doing it, so we flipped our construction into a green construction piece, and we did a bunch of things that were sort of cutting edge. Our business Windows course was hilarious. They were teaching people how to do Word. I'm like, this is really moving to the future of what business needs, teaching people Word. So we partnered with a couple of sort of cutting edge technology companies to look around the corner at what are those essential tech skills. Pretty much every job has them. So I guess I say that to say it is literally astonishing to me the lack of innovation in career and technical education, and or the link between school and what comes next. And what I find astonishing about it is in the US, for whatever reason, that was our escape hatch, and it was a quote-unquote dumping ground for students who were struggling, and we needed, quote, alternative ways to reach them, all of which for me are euphemisms for low expectations. And as a result, our programming, our curriculum, our sequences, our partnerships, reflect that poor quality because those are the values that we didn't commit to. So that also is a huge opportunity. I mean, gosh, I hope that 3 years from now, we're choosing from among all kinds of entrepreneurial new career and technical ed programs, but it's sort of alarming to me that that's not the case.
So wouldn't you give Lillian one word on CTE or career readiness, because I know you're doing some amazing work in Maryland. Talk a bit about that.
Thank you. The Maryland Business Roundtable has one focus in it, and it is education. That is what the Maryland Business Roundtable does. And when I moved into the position in Maryland, I was shocked but very pleased to know that STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math education, is being run by an arm of the Maryland Business Roundtable in Maryland. The president from the Northrop Grumman site out at BWI at one of our international airports is the president of the Maryland, president of the Maryland Business Roundtable, and they have worked with us through the Governor's Workforce Investment Board, the Department of Labor, Higher Ed, and K-12 to build out a statewide longitudinal data system that does everything that Cami and John says. It prognosticates what's going to be out there 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. What are the skills that students are going to need? Because just as you heard in the previous panel, our business community is coming to us saying, we're talking about unemployment, but we have jobs that we can't fill, and we're having to import people into the state of Maryland to fill these jobs. So most of our high schools are partnered with a business partner and a higher ed institution to really look at creative career and technical education programs to get rid of some of those kind of archaic opportunities that are no longer. And the good news for us, and I loved it when Mrs. Resnick said that, a lot of our state, like most, probably is agricultural. And we had a superintendent who was coming to a meeting one day, and he saw this big combine coming through a cornfield. And he's like, surely this thing is going to stop. He sees me coming, and he had to stop in the middle of the road. It was running itself. It was being remotely controlled. This isn't farmland in a state where farming has been a staple forever, to Cami's point. The technology around anything that we do anymore is absolutely amazing. And because we have our business community actually leading us there as great partners, it has been a huge financial support for career and technical education. It has been an opportunity to make sure that we are preparing our students for what will be and not what is. And it has helped us even build capacity, because we have lots of folks in these businesses, and Maryland has a lot of great businesses across the state who can come out at 50 or 55, and they want to give back because they have been so engaged in the schools, so they're taking alternative paths. One of the concerns that we have as we're growing in career and technical education is, as we grow these courses, where do we get the capacity? Where do we get the teachers to teach these courses? So that's something that we wrestle with.
And thank you. And I know that you're also combining some of these pathways with advanced placement courses, college level courses, and universities, sort of scaffolding right to 2 and 4 year universities.
We have college pathways, a requirement for high school graduation. That has been in a memorandum of understanding among our colleges and universities that they will accept them.
Thank you. So quick last word on what are you worried about in terms of the next 25 years in our education system? As succinct as you can be.
Everything would be the... My two biggest worries at the moment are our country, at least in education policy, and there are much smarter people in this room who think about national policy, is very episodic. We do not actually persist. And I am very concerned that we are demanding high persistence and high grit from youth, and I wonder if we will persist through this for the adults. And the second part of that, very much linked with that, is true education for students celebrates the misstep as an opportunity to learn. Mistakes are the entire path towards greater learning. Are we going to allow ourselves to publicly stumble and learn from that as we attempt a massive shift in the way we teach? And I'm not so sure we have a culture of tolerance of adult growth like we do for youth growth, and we don't necessarily have a culture of persistence. We want instant results about 11 months after we start this. And it's just not real, and I think those portend to be very worrisome.
So I worry about lots of things, and you said be brief, so I'm like, oh my gosh, how much time do you have? But I worry that we don't believe. I worry deeply about this incredibly dysfunctional story we tell ourselves, which is that we have to solve poverty before we can create excellent schools, and that young people should be doomed to terrible schools as a result of poverty. Of course, poverty impacts students' readiness to learn and their home life, and all of the things that those little people deserve, they aren't getting, and we should be working on that. But I have schools in Newark where you can go to 3 fifth grade classrooms and see radically different results. And studies have shown that the difference between being even in a mediocre teacher's classroom versus an excellent teacher's classroom leads to radically different educational and life outcomes, let alone a really bad teacher versus an excellent teacher. I have schools in Newark, some charter, some non-charter, in the same neighborhood, same kids, same challenges, that are getting dramatically different results. So I worry deeply that we let ourselves off the hook, and that there's something about a dysfunctional conversation that goes something like this. Poverty is terrible, and it is. And I am just as committed to anyone, and my next job may be around that and not necessarily around ed reform or the intersection of civil rights and ed reform and poverty. It is. And it's a horrible stain on our country's history, and it's inextricably tied to race. And that is all true. At the same time, we have families and students and teachers and schools that are showing that educational excellence is absolutely attainable, and as a result of that, are able to break intergenerational cycles of poverty. But it's the exception, not the rule, and if it can happen anywhere, it should happen everywhere, and I am so worried we don't believe it. And I worry we don't believe it because of deep-rooted issues in this country that we've never confronted, that I worry will replicate themselves if we don't actually confront them and if we don't create success at scale.
I worry about sustainability. John and Cami, people in the state of Maryland are doing some amazing work. We have an administration that has pushed the envelope farther in the present time than any, with the Common Core state standards giving us support. Once the states got out there and said we wanted to do this, they found ways to support us. Looking at what we're doing to hold ourselves as educators accountable with effectiveness, making sure we have good metrics, variable metrics, but holding us accountable to quantitative and objective measures instead of just a subjective. I think we're doing well. Sustainability around the choice movement that is going on, so that the state part of our educational environment doesn't get comfortable with being the only choice in town, but knowing that there are others who are out there who are ready to provide an alternative if students aren't getting what they need in traditional environments. And there's a lot of energy around the work now, a lot of support on many different levels. I worry about the sustainability. I worry about people just getting tired and frustrated with us and moving to another thing. So it is so important that we keep each other close and keep each other informed and give data to help tell the story of where we're going and where we need to go, so that everybody stays on board. The worst thing that can happen in education is we start something and it works really well and then it disappears. So sustainability is a huge issue.
Thank you. You guys have been terrific. Thank you. So.